In the heart of Los Angeles, beneath the weight of towering skyscrapers and amidst the hustle and bustle life, lies a place where lives can change in an instant, the courthouse. Today, we follow the story of a young man named Ethan Rivera, a 19-year-old catapulted into the harsh world of the legal system, facing serious charges of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. On the surface, Ethan seemed like just another clueless teen caught in a troubling situation. But what transpired in that courtroom would reveal his extraordinary determination and resilience. As the trial began, Judge Callahan's skeptical gaze settled on Ethan, dismissing him as just another defendant. But Ethan, undeterred, had spent years preparing for this very moment, not as a criminal, but as a young man armed with knowledge and a relentless spirit. He had grown up watching his mother, a paralegal, navigate the complexities of the law, soaking in every story of injustice and every lesson learned. While others his age were more concerned with sports or social media, Ethan immersed himself in case law, honing his skills like an aspiring lawyer. In that tense courtroom atmosphere, he felt the weight of the judgment, but he also sensed an opportunity. He boldly announced his intention to represent himself, shocking everyone in the room, including the seasoned prosecutor Derek Sullivan. The trial, which many anticipated would be a straightforward win for the prosecution, began to unravel as Ethan took center stage, methodically challenging the evidence against him with eloquence and poise. As he dismantled the case, he didn't just fight for his freedom, he fought for something much bigger: the right to be heard, the right to be understood. Today, we'll witness an inspiring story of resilience, intellect, and the fight against a system that often overlooks the truth. Join us as we delve into Ethan's journey, where he turns a courtroom into a battleground for justice and transforms from a defendant into an advocate for the voiceless. This is a story of empowerment, a testament to the belief that knowledge is power, and that one determined individual can indeed change the narrative. Stay with us as we explore how Ethan challenged the odds, turned his struggles into strength, and emerged not only victorious in his own case, but also transformed into a champion for those who feel marginalized in a complex legal landscape. You won't want to miss this incredible journey of courage, conviction, and ultimately, triumph. Judge Callahan thought he was sentencing a clueless teen until the defendant started dismantling the case like a seasoned lawyer. The air inside the Los Angeles County Courthouse felt thick, almost suffocating. Rows of spectators filled the gallery, murmuring among themselves as they watched the scene unfold. The defendant's table looked too big for the young man standing beside it, hands in his pockets, chin lifted just enough to show he wasn't afraid. Ethan Rivera, 19, accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. The charges were serious, but the way Judge Samuel Callahan looked at him made it clear that the real trial had nothing to do with the law. Callahan leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lazily against the polished wood of his desk. He peered down at Ethan over the rim of his glasses, his lips twisting into something in between a smirk and a sneer. "You think you're some kind of legal expert?" His voice carried a dry amusement. "This isn't a debate club, kid." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor. They were all in on the joke. Ethan didn't flinch. He wasn't laughing. He had spent years preparing for this moment. Not this exact one. He never planned on standing here as a defendant. But he knew the courtroom like the back of his hand. While other kids memorized basketball stats, he memorized case law. While his friends played video games, he played mock trials in his head, arguing imaginary cases with himself. His mother, Patricia Rivera, had worked as a paralegal for over 20 years, and Ethan had grown up listening to the stories she brought home. How prosecutors cut corners, how judges played favorites, how some defense attorneys barely tried. He absorbed everything. By the time he was 14, he could break down a trial better than most law students, but none of that mattered to Callahan. To him, Ethan was just another kid in trouble. "Let's make this quick." The judge sighed, flipping open the case file. "I have a golf game at 2. The audience chuckled again, But this time, something shifted. Ethan's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, because Callahan had just made his first mistake, but the courtroom hadn't noticed yet. The prosecutor, Derek Sullivan, rose from his seat with the air of a man who had already won. His suit was crisp, his tie perfectly knotted, and his voice carried that rehearsed confidence of someone who had delivered the same speech 100 times before. Your Honor, the state will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Ethan Rivera, was caught red-handed in a stolen vehicle, a 2022 Tesla Model 3 reported missing just hours before his arrest. Officers pursued him through downtown, where he allegedly attempted to flee before being apprehended. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The prosecution submits that the evidence speaks for itself. The words landed with weight. The crowd in the gallery shifted, whispering among themselves. On the surface, it sounded damning. A stolen car, a chase, running. Judge Callahan glanced at Ethan over the rim of his glasses and then turned back to Sullivan. Go on. Sullivan walked toward the jury box, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. The defense may try to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding, that Mr. Rivera is some unfortunate victim of circumstance. He turned, locking eyes with Ethan for the first time. But let's be honest, what kind of victim runs from the police? The tension in the room thickened. Judge Callahan leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. Ethan didn't blink. Sullivan continued, flipping through a stack of papers. Your Honor, I have here the testimony of Officer Mark Fields, who personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel before he attempted to flee. The car was confirmed stolen. The arrest was made by the book. Callahan exhaled through his nose, nodding. Sounds straightforward to me. For most people in the room, it probably did. The case was clear-cut. A stolen car, a chase, an arrest. But Ethan had spent too many years studying trials not to see the cracks. Still, he stayed silent, watching, waiting. Judge Callahan tapped his gavel lightly. All right, let's hear the defense's response. He turned to Ethan's lawyer, a public defender named Jamie Collins, who had barely spoken a word since stepping into the courtroom. She stood up, shifting nervously. Your Honor, my client? Ethan placed a hand on her arm. A silent request. She hesitated, then sat back down. For the first time, Ethan spoke. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. The room went completely silent. Callahan stared at him, clearly amused. You'll what? Ethan's voice was calm, steady. I'll be defending myself. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The bailiff's eyebrows shot up. Sullivan's smirk faltered for just a second before he let out a sharp laugh. This should be interesting. But no one was laughing when Ethan took his first step forward because everything was about to change. The weight of the courtroom settled around Ethan as he adjusted his stance, his hands still in his pockets. He let the silence stretch just a little longer, enough to make them uncomfortable, and then finally, he spoke. Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to confirm something with the prosecution. Sullivan raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. Go ahead. Ethan took a slow step forward. You said Officer Mark Fields personally saw me behind the wheel before I was arrested, correct? Sullivan exhaled sharply, already bored. That's right, and that testimony is written in his report. Of course it is. Ethan nodded, then turned to Judge Callahan. Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence. Callahan squinted at him. On what grounds? Ethan pulled his hands from his pockets for the first time and gestured toward the prosecution's table. Because Officer Fields never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began. A flicker of confusion crossed Sullivan's face. What are you talking about? Ethan took another step forward. Your Honor, if the court allows me, I'd like to submit a request to verify Officer Fields' GPS logs from that night. If his report says he witnessed me in the vehicle, then it should match his location history. He let the word hang in the air. Oh, I have a feeling it won't. Now the murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Callahan frowned, glancing towards Sullivan. "Counselor?" Sullivan cleared his throat, his jaw tightening. "That report was filed by an officer of the law, Your Honor. Are we really going to take the word of a defendant over a trained professional?" Ethan gave a small, almost casual shrug. "If the officer was where he claimed to be, then the GPS data will prove it. But if he wasn't," he let the sentence trail off. Callahan studied him for a long moment, then turned to Sullivan. "Does the prosecution have any issue with verifying the officer's GPS logs?" Sullivan hesitated. The pause was just long enough for the jury to notice, for the gallery to notice, and most importantly, for the judge to notice. Ethan took a quiet breath. He had spent years watching trials, studying prosecutors, their tactics, the way they played the system. There was one thing he knew without a doubt. If Sullivan was confident in his case, he wouldn't be stalling. Callahan sighed, rubbing his temple. Finally, Sullivan shook his head. "No objections, Your Honor." But the shift had already begun. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. It was silent, but the tension was loud. Sullivan shuffled his papers, his polished confidence cracking around the edges. "Your Honor, while we wait for the GPS records, the fact remains that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle." Ethan gave a small nod, his face unreadable. "That's true," he said, taking a step forward. "But let's talk about that evidence for a second." Callahan raised an eyebrow, gesturing for him to continue. Ethan turned to the jury, making eye contact with each one of them. "The prosecution wants you to believe that finding my fingerprints in a car means I stole it. That's the story they're selling. But let's think about this logically." He took a deep breath, his tone staying calm and controlled. "Let's say you walk into a department store and try on a jacket. You put your hands in the pockets, maybe zip it up, then put it back on the rack and walk out. A few hours later, someone shoplifts that jacket. Would the fact that your fingerprints are on it mean you stole it?" A few jurors exchanged glances, and someone in the gallery muttered something under their breath. Ethan didn't give them time to recover. The car in question was parked outside a convenience store hours before the alleged theft. I was inside that store with 3 friends. And yes, when we walked past the car, I leaned against it. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked. I didn't think much of it. I didn't take the car, I didn't drive it, I didn't steal anything from inside. Just a dumb moment of curiosity. He let that sit for a second, and then, in a voice that cut through the silence like a scalpel, he asked, "Does touching something make you a criminal?" Sullivan cleared his throat, flipping through his notes as if searching for something, anything, to regain control. But Ethan wasn't finished. And while we're on that topic, let's talk about how the fingerprint analysis was done. He turned to Callahan. "Your Honor, was the forensic specialist from this case subpoenaed to testify?" Callahan blinked, caught off guard by the question. He glanced at Sullivan, who hesitated before answering, "No." Ethan's lips pressed together. "So, let me get this straight. The state is using forensic evidence to try and convict me, but they didn't think it was necessary to bring in the actual specialist who processed that evidence. No chance for me to cross-examine, ask about the chain of custody, or challenge the accuracy of the analysis." Sullivan's jaw tightened. Ethan nodded, almost as if that was all he needed to hear. "Interesting." Judge Callahan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. It was the look of a man realizing this case was not the easy win he had assumed it would be. But Ethan wasn't done yet, because the next thing he was about to say would change everything. Ethan took a slow step forward, his voice steady but firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an official statement from the owner of the vehicle." Callahan frowned. "The owner?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, Mr. Thomas Blake. The registered owner of the stolen Tesla provided a statement to the police that for some reason was never submitted in the prosecution's filings, and I think I know why." He turned to Sullivan. "Do you recall what Mr. Blake told officers the night his car was reported stolen?" Sullivan's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what was coming. Ethan didn't wait for him to answer. Instead, He pulled out a printed transcript from his file and read aloud. "I left my car running when I ran inside the convenience store. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid, and he was white." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ethan held the paper up. "That's from the original police report, the same report the prosecution conveniently never mentioned." He turned back to Judge Callahan. The arresting officer admitted this in his testimony. The prosecution ignored it, and yet they want this jury to believe that I, someone who doesn't even match the description of the real thief, am guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Sullivan stepped forward, scrambling. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was caught in possession of the vehicle." But Ethan shook his head. "No, I wasn't." His voice didn't rise, but it cut through the courtroom with sharp precision. "I was arrested blocks away from where the vehicle was abandoned, walking home after getting snacks with my friends. I wasn't in the car. I wasn't near the car. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing tying me to this case is bad police work and assumptions." Judge Callahan let out a slow breath, rubbing his temple. The case was unraveling fast, and everyone knew it. Ethan turned back to the jury. The real suspect got away that night. The officers found a Latin kid in the same general area and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is really about. Silence hung in the air. Callahan cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Does the prosecution have anything further?" Sullivan was stiff, his face flushed. "No, Your Honor." Judge Callahan exhaled. He looked at Ethan for a long time, then glanced at the jury. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke the words that would stay with everyone in that room. "Case dismissed." A beat of stunned silence followed, then chaos. Half the courtroom erupted, some in disbelief, some in quiet relief. The gallery stirred, reporters scribbling in their notebooks. Ethan didn't move right away. He let the moment settle and let the reality sink in for everyone. Judge Callahan, still gripping his gavel, looked at Ethan with an unreadable expression. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, recognition, maybe even regret. Ethan met his gaze, then turned to leave. But just as he reached the door, the judge spoke again. "Mr. Rivera." Ethan stopped, but didn't turn. Callahan hesitated, then finally said, "You should consider law school." Ethan smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already on his way outside the courthouse. The air was thick with voices, reporters swarming the steps, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Ethan, did you know the judge would dismiss the case? What are you going to do next? How does it feel to outmaneuver a seasoned prosecutor?" Ethan pulled his hoodie over his head, ignoring the questions. He wasn't interested in the spectacle. This wasn't about proving how smart he was. It was about something bigger. His mother, Patricia, was waiting for him at the bottom of the steps, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then finally, she shook her head and let out a breath. "Boy, you scared me half to death." Ethan chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "Had to take a risk, Ma." She stared at him a second longer, then pulled him into a tight hug. "You always were the stubborn one." The cameras kept flashing, but Ethan wasn't paying attention to them anymore. Across the street, standing by his car, Judge Callahan watched. His posture was different now. The arrogance was gone. His expression wasn't amused anymore. It was something else, something closer to reflection. He hadn't expected this case to be anything more than routine. Just another day, another defendant, another guilty plea. But now he knew he'd remember this one, because Ethan had done something most people never could. He made the system look at itself. And for once, it blinked first. Here's the lesson we should learn. How many other cases had gone this way? How many people had been convicted, not because of evidence, but because of bias, shortcuts, and a system that cared more about closing cases than finding the truth? Ethan had the knowledge to fight back, but what about the ones who didn't? This wasn't just about one case. It was about all of them. He knew what he had to do next. This court had to change. As Ethan left the courthouse, the weight of the day settled on his shoulders. He walked past the throngs of reporters, their voices fading as his thoughts consumed him. He'd won today, but how many others like him would walk into that same courthouse and come out with a record, crushed dreams, and shattered futures? The system felt rigged, a game stacked against the young and vulnerable. This thought lingered as he climbed into his car, the engine rumbling to life. Ethan drove through the streets of Los Angeles, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the city. Memories flooded his mind, not just of the trial, but of the years he spent building his knowledge, piecing together the puzzle of law and justice. He remembered the long nights spent studying, the legal books piled high on his desk, and his mother cheering him on every time he made progress. He remembered her pride, her belief in him, the way she'd light up when he'd recite a case or explain a concept. As he navigated familiar streets, he thought about what he could do next. He could continue his education, he could go to law school, but there was more that called to him, a deeper desire to help those who couldn't help themselves. He wasn't just a survivor of this system. He wanted to be an advocate, a defender of truth, someone who stood up when others couldn't. At a stoplight, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his mother's number. With a deep breath, he tapped to call her. She picked up almost instantly. "Ethan, are you okay? What happened in there?" she asked, the concern palpable in her voice. "I won, Ma. They dismissed the case," he answered, a smile creeping onto his face. "Oh, thank God. You had me so worried." She let out a breath of relief. "But Ma, it made me realize something important." He paused, gathering his thoughts, the stoplight changing to green. He drove forward. "I want to help others. I don't just want to go to law school. I want to make a difference." "What do you mean?" Patricia's voice was cautious but filled with curiosity. "I mean, there are so many people out there who don't have the knowledge or resources to fight back, who don't understand their rights or how to navigate this system. What if I dedicated my life to helping them?" Patricia was silent for a moment, processing his words. "Ethan, that sounds like a noble aspiration, but be careful. It's a tough road ahead." "I know, but I'm ready. I feel like today was just the beginning. I want to fight for others the way I fought for myself. I want to advocate for those who feel powerless." "Okay, honey, I believe in you. You've always had a fire in you. Just remember to stay safe and don't let this world harden you." Ethan smiled, buoyed by her support. "I won't, Ma. I promise." As they hung up, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He began mapping out a plan, not just for his future, but for the future he'd want to create for others. He could volunteer at legal aid organizations, offer workshops, start a nonprofit, or even become a public speaker. The possibilities stretched before him like the open road ahead. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. He researched foundations, spoke to lawyers, and connected with others who shared his passion for justice. He studied how to organize community events where people could learn about their rights, how to defend themselves, and how to access legal resources. His mother watched him with pride as he delved deeper into this mission. She saw her son transform, not just from a defendant to a victor, but from a boy to a man with a purpose. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Ethan shared his plans with her. "I want to hold free workshops in the community, Ma. Teach people about their rights, about the legal system. I want people to feel empowered." Patricia nodded, her eyes shining. "That sounds wonderful, Ethan. You can do so much good." Later, he reached out to local community centers, pitching his idea. To his surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Soon, he was booked to host his first workshop, and the excitement bubbled within him. As the day approached, he prepared diligently. He created handouts outlining basic legal rights, gathered information about local resources, and even made a presentation. He practiced in front of a mirror, honing his speech, trying to exude the confidence he felt inside. Finally, the day arrived. The community center was modest, but filled with eager faces as people from various backgrounds gathered to hear him speak. The room buzzed with anticipation. Ethan stood at the front, a mixture of nerves and excitement coursing through him. He took a deep breath, straightened his back, and began. "Thank you all for coming today. My name is Ethan Rivera, and I'm here to share information that I believe can empower you. I've been through the system, and I know how daunting it can feel, but you should never feel powerless. Today, we'll discuss your rights and the resources available to you." As he spoke, he felt his passion ignite a spark in the room. People listened attentively, their eyes focused on him. With each word, Ethan realized this was his calling, to bridge the gap between the legal system and those who felt alienated by it. They discussed fundamental rights, the importance of legal representation, and how to communicate effectively with law enforcement. Ethan was surprised at the questions that poured in. People were eager to learn, to engage, and to find their voices. After the session, several attendees approached him, expressing gratitude and sharing their stories. Each encounter fueled his determination. He realized he wasn't just teaching, he was forming a community, one that could stand together and advocate for themselves. Ethan continued organizing workshops, finding other local mentors and attorneys willing to share their expertise. He embraced a grassroots movement, encouraging others to get involved, speak out, and fight for their rights. Months turned into years, and Ethan's movement grew. What began as small gatherings evolved into a full-fledged organization focused on legal education and advocacy. He collaborated with schools, reached out to at-risk youth, and developed programs that catered to those who had fallen through the cracks of the justice system. He met countless individuals who inspired him, those who had overcome incredible odds, stories etched with struggles but shining with resilience. He learned from them, listened to their experiences, and realized they were all parts of a larger narrative, one where change was possible if only people recognized their worth and power. Eventually, Ethan returned to school to formally pursue law. His experiences informed his studies. Each lecture was another piece of the puzzle he was dedicated to solving. His professors noticed his engagement, his passion, and his ability to connect with complex legal theories through personal experience. During his time in law school, he also worked with pro bono cases. He felt the weight of responsibility as he represented clients, those whose voices often went unheard. He fought fiercely for justice, fueled by determination to ensure that no one else felt the helplessness he once felt. As graduation neared, the culmination of this journey brought him back to the courthouse, where it all began. The case that initially landed him in the defendant's chair was a memory, but it shaped who he was. As he walked through those same halls, he felt a sense of empowerment. He wasn't just a bystander in the justice system, he was an active participant, committed to enacting real change. On the day of commencement, as Ethan stood on the stage wearing his cap and gown, he saw his mother beaming with pride. He looked out at the sea of graduates and felt the rush of possibilities. He wasn't merely accepting a degree, he was embracing his purpose. After graduating, Ethan founded a non-profit organization named Empower Legal Aid, dedicated to providing resources and education to marginalized communities. His work aimed to demystify the legal system, making it accessible to everyone, emphasizing the power in knowledge. Years later, as he stood in front of a large audience at a community event, he spoke not just as an attorney, but as a survivor, as someone who had walked that difficult path. He recalled his journey, showcasing the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what's right. This journey began in a courtroom where I felt trapped and targeted, he said, his voice steady and passionate. But today, I stand here not as a victim, but as a voice for those who feel voiceless. Our pasts do not dictate our futures. Instead, they inform the change we can create in this world. The audience erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had come full circle, and while the challenges ahead were daunting, he was ready to face them with resolve and a community behind him. As he left the stage, he knew his work was just beginning. Empower Legal Aid was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, and he needed to continue pushing boundaries, challenging norms, and standing up for those who needed it most. The courtroom, that once felt like a prison, had become a beacon of hope, a place where justice was not just an ideal, but a tangible reality for those willing to fight for it. Ethan knew that the journey of justice was ongoing, and that with each step, he was not just paving the way for himself, but for countless individuals who sought to reclaim their narratives. He wasn't merely a voice among many, he was a catalyst for change, a testament to the fact that one person, armed with knowledge and determination, could indeed make a profound difference in the world.